I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you very much for joining us this Monday evening. We have a special tribute for you tonight as we remember the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy, and we're going to cover a lot of ground here with a very special panel of guests. President Trump's racially insensitive remarks, of course, and behavior didn't start last week with his infamous comments about Haitians and Americans, but they are the talk of not only the country, but even the world. We're going to take a look at how this went way beyond that conversation and a long history of saying these kinds of things. We also take a look into whether or not Dr. King's dream is being realized, or are we headed actually in the wrong direction? And we will finish up, as we do every year, by playing the iconic I Have a Dream speech for you in its entirety. But we begin tonight in the White House, where we are dealing with yet another controversy over race with this president. And it came to a critical mass with the president's own words late last week. During an Oval Office conversation with lawmakers about protecting immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, Trump reportedly said, "Why are we having all these people from these S-hole countries coming here?" Trump then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries such as Norway. "Why do we need more Haitians? Take them out," he reportedly said. The White House, in response, never questioned the quotes were valid, at least not at first. Then, Friday, a man in the room, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, confirmed them.
He said these hate-filled things, and he said them repeatedly. When the question was raised about Haitians, for example, he said, "Haitians, do we need more Haitians?" And then he went on when we started to describe the immigration from Africa that was being protected in this bipartisan measure. That's when he used these vile and vulgar comments, calling the nations they come from shitholes. The exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly. When it came to the issue of, quote, chain migration, I said to the president, "Do you realize how painful that term is to so many people? African Americans believe that they migrated to America in chains. And when you speak about chain migration, it hurts them personally." And he said, "Oh, that's a good line."
By late Friday, the quote had taken on a life of its own. At an event officially proclaiming today as Martin Luther King Day, the President of the United States was asked a question by April Ryan, frankly, that became the right question to ask. She, the White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. Listen for yourself.
Mr. President, did you refer to African nations? Did you refer
Mr. President, are you a racist? Mr. President, are you a racist?
By Sunday, the president's comments and questions about whether he's a racist were dominating the headlines. The White House and its surrogates began to deny then the quote, and the president denied being a racist.
No, I'm not a racist. I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed.
But what we decided to do was to take a check of the president's history. Even before politics, Trump has led a lot of people, from civil rights leaders to lawmakers to the New York Times editorial page, to conclude that, in fact, he may fit that description to a T. Our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, takes a long look back at not just the campaign or even his 1 year in the Oval Office, but the years leading up to now.
That's right, Rich. The Trump file on race goes all the way back to Trump's father, Fred, who was once arrested but not charged at a KKK march in 1927. Donald Trump's name was first associated with racial issues after a complaint related to a housing complex his father owned and of which Donald was the company president. In the early 1970s, the Trump Organization was sued by the federal government for excluding black tenants. Of 3,700 units in Trump Village in Queens, only 7 were occupied by African-American families. The Trump signed a consent decree to end the case and pledged to ensure the desegregation of Trump buildings, but did not admit to any wrongdoing. Flash forward to the late 1980s and early 90s, when anecdotes and official records show more racial problems for Trump, this time in Atlantic City. In one case, a former Trump Castle employee says black workers were pulled off the casino floor whenever Donald and Ivanka Trump showed up. In another case, the New Jersey Casino Control Commission fined Trump Plaza $200,000 for violating state anti-discrimination laws. Then there are the incidents many of you know about or may remember. In 1989, Trump paid $85,000 to place this ad in the 4 daily newspapers in New York City. It came in the wake of the Central Park jogger rape attack. The ad doesn't name any specific suspects, but it calls for the reinstatement of the death penalty and clearly targets the 5 young men, 4 black, 1 Hispanic, who were arrested and considered suspects in that case. Problem is, the Central Park 5, as the group were known, were innocent. All were eventually cleared after DNA evidence came to light. They eventually sued and settled with the city for $41 million. But even during the presidential campaign, 27 years after their arrest and 14 years after they were freed from prison, Trump refused to acknowledge their innocence. Which brings us to Donald Trump, the candidate and president, where in many cases Trump has intentionally sought to bring race into the public discourse, and often in ways seen as insensitive or far worse. Which of course included the opening minutes of Trump's presidential campaign when he claimed Mexico was sending us their criminals and their rapists. Or his disparagement of a Mexican-American federal judge overseeing his Trump University suit, who Trump claimed could not be impartial because of his Mexican heritage. By the way, Judge Gonzalo Curiel was born in Indiana. Then as a candidate, Trump called for all Muslims to be banned from entering the U.S., a policy he has pursued in office despite multiple rejections from various federal courts. Recently, Trump has been quoted as saying Haitians who entered the United States, quote, all have AIDS, and that the 40,000 recent immigrants to the United States from Nigeria would, quote, never go back to their huts in Africa. And then there was Charlottesville, where white supremacists rallied to try to stop the removal of a Confederate statue that ended with a counter-protester being run over and killed. Trump's response to the violence and bigotry on display?
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And finally, a reminder that Donald Trump's recent rise in politics all began when he questioned the background of the nation's first black president, Barack Obama. Trump questioned the validity of Obama's birth certificate, his college and graduate transcripts, and claimed Obama might have been a secret Muslim. He never offered any proof, and though late in the campaign, Trump finally admitted he believed Obama was born in the U.S., as recently as 2 months ago, Trump reportedly told people close to him that he still questions the validity of Barack Obama's birth certificate. Rich?
Thank you, Andrew. And with that, let me bring in our panel. Thomas Nins is a senior pastor at the First Baptist Church in Greenwich and chaplain at the Greenwich Police Department. Dominic Carter, of course, you know, political journalist and author. Jerica Richardson is a former spokesperson for People Horror and Mayor Bill de Blasio. And former NYPD Chief of Department Philip Banks joins us as well. Thank you all. I think sometimes people have thrown the term racist around in recent years too casually to the point where it almost loses its power and its significance. But I think the question tonight is a fair one, and I've seen sober people that I respect that tread carefully in that language, look at the history as Andrew just laid out, the definition of the word, and they conclude to the question that April Ryan asked today, are you a racist, that we didn't get an answer from the president? The answer, if not has to be yes, it's difficult to answer any other way. Reverend?
First, thanks for having me on the show. Let me say this, first of all. I had no idea people from Norway were trying to escape or, migrate out. So, God bless the people, poor Norwegians trying to get to the United States. Is the guy a racist? For me, it's deplorable. Is he deplorable? Does he say deplorable things? Yes, he does. Does he display an alarming amount of ignorance on a consistent basis? Yes, he does. And do his comments reflect a majority of those who support him and voted for him? For me, that's a larger issue than if he singularly is a racist and singularly feels this way.
When we use the term power attached to intent and pattern, this is not some one-off. This was not some comment with just 7 senators in a room as he's signing a document. We went through the brief history, and trust me, you can go back even further. And Dominic covered for 30 years in New York City. There's countless other stories that are attached to this as well, but this is a 1-hour program. How would you how would you answer the same question April Ryan asked? Is he?
You know, I think we just have to look at his words, his deeds, his actions. I mean, Andrew went through the list. Like Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I don't think there's anything for us to question right here. I think the one thing that we should be taking away from it, if nothing else, is the hypocrisy. The one thing that his spokesperson said, who, mind you, did not actually flat out deny that the comments were made, he deflected and talked about the president wanting people in this country who could actually contribute to it. I think many of the immigrant groups that have been raised and mentioned, both in the past and most recently in the remarks, absolutely are doing that. Some of them have served in our military. There are doctors, there are lawyers. So if anybody is contributing to this country and should be here, it's those very people that he's, I think, tried to keep out. If anything, they're more patriotic than he is.
You know, Phil, for me, trying to break the program into segments so that it just doesn't all overwhelm. We're going to talk about some of the policies that have happened in the last year and some of the proposals going forward, which I think speaks to different treatment and different intent for treatment. But just the idea that we're asking the question in 2018, and just think about that, in 2018, is the President of the United States racist? And I know no one who says, oh, that's a crazy question. My God, even after an insane campaign last year, we're saying that right now. We're asking that question. It's insane.
It is insane, and I think that not only is he racist, I think he's a proud racist. I think that he's proud of it. I don't think that he hides behind it. I think that he gives his standard, I'm the most, I'm the least, I'm the best, so forth and so on. And I think what he's trying to say is that this is who I am, so you can talk about me or you can do something about it. Because we can talk all day about Donald Trump and the bigger issue of Trumpism. Why do so many people follow or this type of ideology, and is that a bigger question for the country? I think Donald Trump wants to come out and say, it's almost like the movie The Few Good Men. He wants to come out and say, I'm a racist, I'm a proud racist, I don't believe all men were created equal. This is what I'm going to do, now you stop me. And I think we need to start thinking about strategically, what do you do to stop an individual like that? Because power corrupts, and I certainly think that there's something just not right in this person's head.
You know, Dom, I think he's right in that I thought that there's been numerous times you got a flash of it after Charlottesville when he was up there, and that first he gave the statement where he read off the prompter and he condemned the actions, and the next day when there was a hot mic there and people were asking questions and he didn't like being put in a corner, he wanted to say what he really felt, right? Then we got a snapshot of it. And the most despicable thing that I'm not sure everyone realizes wasn't just the comments that he said with the lawmakers around, but was what reportedly happened that evening, where he was calling around to supporters of his, doing a quote-unquote victory lap, because he was so proud of the reaction to the division that was going down. We're pandering to, I don't know what the percentage is in this country. I don't know if it's 20%, 25%, 30%, whatever they say the base is, and I'm not sure all the base signed up for this, but saying, hey, I got red meat for you today. To me, that was the most disheartening thing. It wasn't just the ugliness of it, but the idea that I got him.
Well, you know, Richard, initially I thought that the president was just playing the race card to get elected, to play to his base, because we can all deny it, but I think everybody at this table knows that some public officials specifically play the race card, and there is a benefit to them playing the race card, sadly and unfortunately. But imagine how I feel these days. I've engaged with this man on a personal level, and either he's done a good job of fooling me, because I never, ever, in the phone calls, the person-to-person encounters, I never saw a racist, he never said a racist thing ever in front of me. But how can we say he's not a racist? Of course he's a racist. Look at what he's saying. Look at what he's doing. He does not hide it, to the chief's point. He wants us to know. So I'm torn because I'm like, wait a minute now. This man never showed this to me throughout the years. And look at how he's acting now in public. You cannot defend what the President of the United States is doing these days.
And the idea that they all live in huts, they all have AIDS, why do we got to bring them in this country? It's either a closed-mindedness, a lack of intellectual curiosity, or just you never, I don't know how you lived in New York, frankly, your whole life and didn't realize, especially in Queens, which is more diversity than anywhere else, although you hadn't been there in a while. But my point is, my God, this is from the President of the United States. This isn't some surrogate that you hide, or he'll throw some guy out to play the race guard or Steve Bannon. This is him.
Yes, it is.
And you know what? I'm sorry. More than anything, I was sad. We've been angry. We're angry after Charlottesville, but it was sad when you think about the conversations we have to have right now.
On the Mount Rushmore of presidential lies, you've got, I'm not a crook. This is not a war, it's a conflict. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And now this guy, this guy, it's almost like walking insanity. The things that he says and the things that he says after he says them really suggest that there's an instability there. There's something that's off about this guy.
Did you, though, if I said a year ago, after the craziness of the campaign and everything else, did you think then that what he thought about people that weren't white that you think tonight?
Absolutely. There's no.
So he confirmed your worst suspicions.
There was no surprise to
revelation.
this, and I think probably to the panel and to people in general who have an ear and have had experiences knew that this was coming. Perhaps we just didn't know how boldly it was going to happen and how frequently.
Okay. With that, when we come back, Dr. King famously said he had a dream. Now, what is the state of that dream? I ask this question every year, but there is some tangible evidence that we are headed in the wrong direction, where they often say 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I don't know any steps forward in the past 12 months. We'll talk about that, and also some policies that are either underfoot or being proposed right now that you may be surprised we're talking about in 2018. Stay with us.